Cup? Is there a Rugby World Cup example? All these things, and then is there a way we can twist that? One interesting thing I did at Fidelity, which is where I was before I joined Citi, was test a bit of a social campaign with them. They'd been doing social, but it was just, again, it was tactical. 10 minutes, great, not 10 seconds, good. It was very tactical, so just blasting a lot of stuff out. So what I did was I looked at, built this content plan, and it happened to be just as the World Cup, I think it was it the World Cup? Yeah, it must have been, was coming around. Now, it's not relevant and it's not authentic for a financial services organisation to come in and go, yeah, go England, we love football. It's just clearly riding on the back of something that's going on in people's lives. No one's going to believe it. It's non-authentic. So there's no point in doing that. So what I did there was create a social media campaign around the World Cup of economies. So if the economies of the world were to play each other, who would win the World Cup? Which was a nice idea, and you could put them all into the buckets of the World Cup, and then you could play them off against each other and see who wins. And that was something that resonated with people because the World Cup was on, but also resonated with the clients because they're interested in the financial information as well. So kind of twisting these stories is a great way to produce relevant content, but you can only do that if you've got this plan that shows you in advance all the things that are going to be happening. Because your content strategy, ultimately, it needs to be both proactive and reactive, right? So this plan will allow you to be proactive and plan in advance, but you still need to have this reactive element, which is where the processes come in to say, if something breaks in the news, or if our competitors do X, Y, Z, we can react to that, and we can be the first to react to that. We haven't got a 48-hour sign-off process with compliance. How many people work with compliance departments here? Not many of you. Good. Lucky all the rest of you. So, where there are sign-off processes, you don't have to run off to someone, and if they're on holiday, you've got to run off to someone else and send emails backwards and forth. You need to be able to react really, really quickly with this stuff. So, so the processes are vitally important. Do you have SMEs? Those of you that are in the B2B world, I don't mean small to medium enterprises. I mean subject matter experts. So again, if you're going to talk about a specific subject, do you have the experts in the business who are able to talk about that subject? If you're not, then you run the danger of making something a bit wishy-washy that people can't really buy into, or actually your customers might know more about than you. And if you don't, maybe you should be using external resource. We come back into do we outsource, do we insource question as well. I'll skip over distribution channels. I think we all know there's a lot of them available. Curation or creation. So again, this can come down if you don't have the SMEs. Maybe you don't need to create. Maybe it's just curating. So maybe it's just finding content and pulling it together in a way that's relevant for your consumers. So just a couple of interesting stats for you there. 24% of organizations now devote 50% or more of their budget to content. And 84% of B2B marketers said brand awareness was a top goal. So your content is just increasingly becoming vitally important, really. Just some obviously things that are happening. There's tons of this stuff going on at the moment. So the Internet of Things, I'd imagine we all know what that is, right? So I've got some of them in my house now, and I'm sure some of you have as well. Wearables, implants. So there's the Apple Watch and various other wearables moving towards implants. I know somebody who knows somebody who's got an implant. So at the moment they have an implant in their wrist. And they work in biochemicals. So they're in a lab, so they use it to unlock the door to the lab and to turn on certain equipment and turn the lights and things like that, recognize when they're in the room. So that's happening, which is scary as hell, but hey, it's happening, so we need to embrace it. World Wi-Fi, so Google Loon, everyone know what Google Loon is? Anyone know? Let's have a hands up, anyone knows what Google Loon is? Okay, a few of us. So Google Loon is Google's project to have balloons up in the atmosphere, very high altitudes, that move in the winds and can be controlled to move into certain places in the wind that project Wi-Fi down to the ground and therefore allow areas that have no chance of getting Wi-Fi to have Wi-Fi access. Very good for disaster situations, for example, but the idea being obviously we can cover remote areas that will never get Wi-Fi otherwise with some kind of signal. Facebook have a connectivity lab, I think they call it, doing a similar thing in a different way. Li-Fi, anyone know about Li-Fi? Yeah, good. I only read that one last week, so I didn't think anyone would. Li-Fi is a new piece of technology I don't think we're going to see for a little while, but it's the ability to transmit Wi-Fi around your home using your lights. I don't know how it works yet. I haven't read much about it, but it's fascinating that that's going to be possible because I certainly get terrible signal in certain rooms in the house. I'm sure some of you have similar problems. Yeah, beacons. Anyone working with beacon technology here? Yeah, so great. So you'll know all about that. So beacons, enabling you to recognise and take actions based on clients as they move around various proximities. And of course, we all know about drones and the possibilities. So there's loads of things. There's obviously tons of future technology that's coming in. The point here is that these things are all moving very fast, and they will all change consumer behaviour, and they'll all change it very quickly. So if we've got this Li-Fi idea, then the distant parts of people's houses that they don't sit in, and there's probably some stat on what rooms get the least Wi-Fi. Maybe the studies or something are the worst at getting Wi-Fi signals. People have to buy extenders for those all the time. That will disappear. So sales of Wi-Fi extenders will go down for a start. But also, if people are able to work better in those rooms, maybe their behaviours will change. If people in different areas of the world are suddenly able to access Wi-Fi, we're going to open up a whole new segment of consumers. Then is that relevant for you as well? And the Internet of Things. If the home is becoming increasingly connected, people suddenly don't need to spend time doing things in their home because they can do them on their phone whilst they're on their way home, and that gives them a bit more free time in the evening. Again, it changes behaviours. So we don't know what all these behaviours are going to be, what all the impact of these is going to be. The important thing is when you're developing your strategy to make sure you account for the fact that some of these things are happening, and review your strategy and understand whether it will need to evolve, whether it will need to develop to account for that. These red dots are just some conceptual ideas about what jobs might arrive in the future at some point. So child designer is a great one. I could do one of those. My kids are a nightmare. I don't mean that. I don't mean that. They're wonderful. Nanomedic and vertical farmer growing crops upwards, and lots of these ideas that absolutely can happen with the technology that we're developing. So very interesting. I've just realised what I've called this slide, considering we talked about how the CEO is your enemy. That's obviously a joke. So this is about decision making. How am I doing? Oh, I've got 1 minute. I'm sorry. I'll go really really quickly. So this is really psychology. So some of you will recognise these, but the point here is that there's lots of different decision making models, and understanding the way your C-suite make their decisions in the business is really useful when you're pushing your strategy to them for approval, or when someone is bringing a strategy to you for approval. So everything from personal preference. I've certainly had some CEOs who have made their decisions entirely on how they feel at the time, which can be exceptionally difficult, and you therefore need to befriend, as we were saying, right? We therefore need to befriend them, understand them, make sure you understand what their motivations are and work with them on that, all the way through to consensus decision making, where a majority on a board would need to vote and go through a formal process. I won't spend time on this, but it's worth having a read through some of these things. Pros and cons, obviously, is very obvious, very clear. Flippism, flipping a coin, pretty much is a 50-50 decision. A decision maker who brings in other people to see what their views are before he makes his decision, and a group who are voting things. So those are the kind of different routes, and it's just a psychology point that's worth looking at. This is just a framework. You'll all know this, but this is a framework that I came out with a couple of years ago for when you're building a presentation, a success framework. It helps. There's nothing revolutionary in here. It's just a good way to remember it, whether you guys are doing it or whether you're getting someone else to present a strategy for you. Getting them to use this framework is quite helpful. So your executive summary at the start is your beginning, your scene setting, which is your background, your goals, what are you trying to achieve, where are you now, your story, what are you actually doing, what are the channels that you're doing, and how are you going about putting those into place. Sums, so financials, what's the financial impact. Steps are the actual action plans, dates, milestones, and surprise is be prepared for questions, be prepared for anything that can crop up. Make sure you've done your background reading and your research really. So that's your, I'll let you all take a picture of that. Wonderful. Have we got it? Good. And that's it. So 11:16, that's not too bad.